You know, when you think about it, your circulatory system is just this incredible masterpiece of engineering, right? I mean, you've got over 60,000 miles of arteries and veins and capillaries all working together perfectly. But what happens when a dangerous, unmapped shortcut suddenly pops up in that perfect roadmap? Well, that's exactly what we're going to dive into.
So that dangerous shortcut, it has a medical name. It's called an acquired arteriovenous fistula, or AVF for short. And really, it's as simple and as dangerous as it sounds. It's just a direct, totally abnormal connection that forms between an artery and a vein. Two blood vessels that are absolutely supposed to be kept separate.
To really get what's going on, let's use an analogy. Think of your arteries as these high-pressure, multi-lane highways, just blasting blood away from the heart. And your veins? They're the low-pressure local streets, gently guiding that blood back home. An AVF? Well, it's like someone built an illegal off-ramp, dumping all that high-speed highway traffic directly onto a quiet neighborhood street. The result? You guessed it? Absolute chaos. So what really happens when this high-pressure arterial blood just slams into the low-pressure venous system? I mean, we're not just talking about a little traffic jam here. This is a fundamental breakdown of how the whole system is designed to work, and it sends shockwaves through the entire body.
You know, the story of how we even figured all this out is pretty fascinating. It starts, as a lot of medical stories do, with trauma on the battlefield. But it's evolved to a point where one of the most common causes is now found inside the very hospitals that are supposed to be healing us. The history here is really, really telling.
Our understanding kicks off way back in 1761, all because of a simple bloodletting procedure that went wrong. But it was really the invention of high-speed bullets in 19th century wars that made AVFs a common and deadly serious injury. Fast forward to the Vietnam War, and thousands of cases were being documented, mostly in soldiers' arms and legs. But the big story, the real shift today, is the rise of what we call iatrogenic causes. That's a fancy way of saying fistulas that are accidentally created during medical treatments. And when we look at the numbers today, yeah, penetrating trauma, things like gunshots and stab wounds, it still makes up the biggest piece of the pie, about 60%. But look at that second slice. A full 30% of these fistulas are iatrogenic. They're a direct complication of modern medicine. And that reveals a really interesting paradox of progress, doesn't it?
And look, we're not talking about some obscure experimental procedures here. We're talking about really common things, like cardiac catheterizations to check on the heart, placing central lines for IV meds, doing biopsies on organs like the kidney or liver, and even some pretty standard spine and knee surgeries. These are life-saving interventions for sure, but they all carry this small but very real risk of creating one of these dangerous shortcuts.
Okay, so we know what an AVF is and where it can come from. But how does your body let you know something's wrong? Well, fortunately, the signs are incredibly unique, so much so that doctors recognized them centuries ago. Let's go back to that very first description by William Hunter in 1761. He wrote about an associated tremulous motion and hissing noise. It's almost poetic, right? But it's also a perfect description of these intense physical forces at play, and it's still the best way to describe the two classic signs of an AVF. So that tremulous motion Hunter felt? Today, doctors call that a thrill. It's a vibration that's so strong you can actually feel it with your hand right over the fistula. And that hissing noise? That's what's called a bruit, a whooshing sound a doctor can hear with a stethoscope. Both of these signs are caused by that violent, high-pressure arterial blood, just crashing into that quiet, low-pressure vein.
But a thrill and a bruit, those are just the local signs. The real danger, the one that affects the whole body, is the cascade of problems it creates for your heart. See, that shortcut diverts a huge amount of blood straight back to the heart, which dramatically increases the volume it has to deal with. So what does the heart do? It's forced to work overtime, pumping harder and harder 24/7. Over time, that causes the heart muscle to get bigger. But that's not a sustainable fix. Eventually, the overworked heart just can't keep up, and that can lead to a very serious condition called high-output heart failure.
And while all that's going on with the heart, things are not going well back at the fistula site either. That poor, overwhelmed vein and all the vessels connected to it start to fail under the pressure. This can lead to some nasty local effects, like major swelling in the limb, new varicose veins popping up, and sometimes even the skin breaking down into ulcers. All because the venous system just cannot handle that constant, high-pressure assault.
So, we've got a serious plumbing problem on our hands. It can strain the heart to its breaking point and wreck a limb. The question is, how do we fix it? And this is where the story of medical innovation really starts to shine.
First off, here's a surprising fact. Not every single AVF needs an immediate aggressive fix. Turns out, the body has this amazing ability to heal itself. For the smaller fistulas, especially the ones caused by needle sticks during medical procedures, somewhere between 38 and 81% of them might actually close up all on their own over time. Pretty amazing.
Now, for the fistulas that do need to be fixed, there are basically two main approaches. You've got the classic method, open surgery. A surgeon makes an incision, goes in, finds the vessels, and literally stitches the whole shut. And then you've got the modern approach, endovascular therapy. This is where specialists fix the problem from the inside out by navigating tiny catheters right through your blood vessels to the site of the injury.
And the tools they use for this internal repair are they're ingenious. Doctors can deploy something called a covered stent, which is basically like putting a patch on the inside of the artery to cover the hole. Or they can pack the fistula with these tiny little metal coils that make the blood clot and seal the leak. They can even inject a kind of medical-grade superglue to just seal the connection shut.
And if you want to see just how powerful this modern approach can be, just look at the data. For injuries in a really tricky spot, like near the shoulder, one study from 2016 found that open surgery had a complication rate of over 25%. But the endovascular approach? 0%. For the right patient and the right injury, the benefit is just undeniable.
So when you step back and look at the whole journey, it's just remarkable. This thing went from being a condition first noticed after a botched bloodletting to a devastating war wound. And now it's a manageable problem that, in a lot of cases, can be fixed with just a tiny puncture in the skin. It's an absolutely stunning story of progress.
And that kind of leaves us with one last big thought. The rise of these medically caused AVFs, it shows us that as our ability to intervene gets more and more powerful, so does the potential for new, unintended problems. It's the paradox of progress, really. So the question we have to ask ourselves is, how do we make sure our ability to fix problems always stays one step ahead of our ability to create them?